Well, welcome all. A couple of weeks ago I put out a video regarding my thoughts about the Zip-On motorised pan head, and during the production of that, when I was out in the field, I tried to use the Duan transmount transmitter to send to the phone the image from the camera, and it just would not connect. I could not get an ad hoc wireless network established, and no matter what I tried, I just simply couldn't get any sort of signal coming through. So I had to do the walk through guesswork, and fortunately it turned out okay. And when I got home to further do the video for that particular session, again I had difficulty getting connection with the transmount, and it's not the first time it's happened, and it sometimes tends to be fairly problematic, and I don't know what causes it, but it's just the way that it seems to work at times. And I got very frustrated, especially in the outdoor side, because I really did want to do some video sort of stuff with the motorised pan head that I've got there, and automatically sort of control stuff and be able to see what's actually being recorded rather than standing behind the camera, because some of the scenes that I want to do, I want to be in front of the camera. And because of that frustration and the sort of issues that I've had from time to time with the transmount, and one big thing with the transmount is that with the internal battery, I always have to use a power brick to charge it or keep it running, because the battery just doesn't seem to last a single session of one of these sorts of videos, and that too is very, very frustrating. So I started looking around at something a little bit more versatile, and after doing a lot of sort of YouTubing and general research on websites, it looked like the Hollyland Mars 300 Pro video transmission system would be possibly the way to go. And once I sort of convinced myself that the Hollyland is reasonably good, I decided to bite the bullet and get it. And it turns out to be quite a good unit, and I'll just get into that shortly about how it works and all the rest. But what I sort of found as a very good deal from somebody I'd bought off previously on eBay, the unit actually came not just with the unit itself, or the two units. It came with a carry case, which is very similar to the one that Hollyland provides, and which you pay extra for. It had also 2 sets of batteries. It came with 3 sets of HDMI cables, full-size HDMI to HDMI, then full-size to mini, and full-size to micro. So that was pretty good as well. And it's been a fairly good system in my testing so far, and I'll sort of get into some of that. What I didn't, I decided not to do is just go a field shot where I walk away from the camera and explain how far it works and all the rest, because I don't really think that that displays anything. You don't see what I'm seeing. You're not really getting a proper representation of what's actually happening, simply watching me walk away from the camera with a monitor in my hand. So I decided not to do that, because it's kind of superfluous. You either are happy with the views that I've got of it, or you're not. And I wasn't interested in going at 100 metres or whatever the actual range is, because that's not where I'm going to be using the camera or the video system in real life. It'll be less than 30 metres away, if that, probably more likely 10 to 20 metres, and it works in that sort of scenario very, very well. Some issues with the unit itself, or the units, and they're not negatives in the sense of quality or anything, just an annoyance. The units actually come with very little as far as the accessories goes. It came with a cold shoe mount, and it's got a little mount that screws onto the back of the unit so that you can attach the cold shoe or any other things. I've got a NATO clamp on mine, but what is annoying is it only came with one. Both units have the holes to take the little quarter 20 mount, but it only came with one. I don't know why. It really would have been useful to have 2, and I've searched the internet and you can't get them. You cannot buy the units anywhere. They're all out of stock, and so it even beggars belief that something as simple as that is unavailable. Small make a sort of an adapter for this, which sort of emulates that but in a different way. You can't get those either. I think I may have been able to get one from B&H or so, but I just don't want to go through the hassles of ordering through them. And so that's one sort of minor niggling issue that I've got with it. I don't know why they can't provide proper accessories, or then at least have them on sale. And that's not unique to Hollyland as far as I'm concerned. That happens with a lot of different companies. You cannot get accessories. Classic is, for example, Tilter. I've got the Nucleus Nano controller, and I've been trying to find a second motor for it, and it's almost impossible to find. There are a few available now, but they're asking virtually half the price of what a complete set is worth with the hand controller and all. So I can't see an ordinary motor costing that much. So I've not really bothered getting it, even though I'd like to have one. So the unit itself works quite well. I did a battery test with it, and just basically attached it to the camera, had it running non-stop and transmitting, and I got 2 hours and 45 minutes, just a fraction over, before the transmitter died. It used more power than the receiver, obviously, and it was all running sort of fairly well together, same voltage, until it got to about the 7 volt mark or so, and then the transmitter started to race away, sort of almost in a whatever you want to call it, non-linear mode. It dropped down at about 5 volts, it cut out. So that was pretty amazing anyway, that it went for so long, and that's fairly good. The other thing about this is that it's not actually talked about very often, or I haven't seen it anywhere in the videos. It can take quite a while for the units to actually autos find each other. It'll find a suitable channel. I've recorded up to 25 seconds before it actually finds each other. So it depends on how far away they are. If you bring them in close, it can be a little bit quicker, but if you have them separated for some reason, they tend to take quite a while before they find each other and settle on a particular frequency. So that's a bit of a surprising thing, but once they're locked in, they stay locked in. They don't sort of deviate from there at all, so that part of it is actually quite good. And when I was running these, I did a temperature test. Neither unit went above about 32 degrees centigrade, and that was constant running, so that's actually pretty good. And it wasn't a cold area where I was working, so that was also sort of informative. And some people say there's fan noise on these. You almost cannot hear the fan noise at all. I haven't adjusted it at all from the standard, and you can stick your ear right up against it and you can barely hear it. The fan noise coming from the Pocket 4K is louder than what this produces. So the intent of this is to have some sort of a way of easily using it, and what I've got is, and I'll show you shortly, I'll set up a different setup so you can get a close view of what I'm talking about, but I can stick this just on top of the mat box, if I can get it in, on there, and that holds it fairly well, because there's no way I'm going to be walking around with that. If I'm going to be using the transmitter on the camera will be on a tripod, so it's not like that is going to be jarred about and fall off and break. Now the other thing I had to do, and this is what I'll show you shortly, is make myself a little unit that I can actually watch what's going on. I was originally just going to use my mobile phone, but that really didn't sort of suit the scenario as well as I wanted it to. So what I did was I created myself a little director's monitor, if you want to call it that, or whatever, that finally my Shinobi has a use, which is now the monitor for this particular unit. And for some strange reason it seems to work much better as a director's monitor than it did with the camera monitor system that I had. Don't know why, but at least it's not complete trash now. And I've set it up like this. I've got a handheld or hand grip on one side. I've got the Nucleus Nano controller on the top here that I can actually use with my other Pocket 4K with the long lens, and the receiver just sort of sits there, and it's a nice little easy thing to hold. And right at the top here I've got my little remote mobile phone sort of controller for start and stopping the camera, or either camera for that matter, and I can just reach that really easily and touch it. And that's one reason why I don't intend to use this at a great distance, because the maximum you're going to get out of probably either of the focus controller or the start-stop controller is maybe up to about 20 metres or so. I haven't actually tried a distance with the tilter. It might go a bit further, but that's sort of one of the factors that really sort of means I'm not going to be using this from a great distance. But for what it does and the distance that it does work at, it does work very, very well. The latency is probably about what they say, 80 milliseconds or so, and that's more than adequate. In fact, if you're an experienced focus puller, I really do think you could pull focus with this with a moving subject. And if it's a static subject, absolutely no drama at all, obviously. And the interesting thing I found was that one thing which does have a lot of latency is when you stick a headphone set into the side of the monitor to get audio, you get pretty good audio coming out of it, but it's way longer latency. And I think the reason for that is that there are about 7 stages where the audio's got to travel before it actually gets to the monitor itself. And that goes from the microphone or the lav that you've got on you, that then is sent to the receiver on the camera. That goes from the receiver into the camera, from the camera to the camera monitor, then from the camera monitor to the transmitter to the receiver, and then finally back into the monitor itself on the handheld unit there. And so there's a lot of steps, and obviously there's delay occurring all the way through, so the latency there is probably, I'd say, 3 times longer than what it is with the visual latency on the monitor itself. So that part actually works really, really well, and the audio latency is not really a problem. At least you're hearing it and you're knowing that you're getting audio, even though it's delayed as far as the signal goes. So that doesn't really bother me very much at all. But this little unit, and I'll get a close-up of that shortly, works quite well. It factors in all the bits and pieces that I need. I can take the control wheel off there quite easily. Everything dismantles quite simply. And it's actually put to use a lot of stuff that I've had sitting around, as always, and I'll never let anything go to waste, and these bits and pieces have all come together to allow me to have something that's quite useful and quite handy. So I can use this or hand this to anybody else to actually see what's going on, and it works quite well. So I'll take a bit of a break at the moment, and I'll reset the system so I can show you how this handheld unit comes together in a close-up view. So I'll just take a pause and then I'll come back shortly. This is the unit itself, and I'm giving you a close-up so you can sort of see how it all comes together. I used the app initially. It took me about 5 or 10 minutes to get the thing going because it didn't want to connect to the motor itself. One of those frustrations. But I'll just pan this around on the slow mode, and you should get quite a nice little view of what the unit looks like from different angles. It took me a bit of fiddling around, adjusting the units, components, and working out where to put the particular components. But at the end of the day, I'm actually quite happy with the way it's turned out. It's a very comfortable thing to hold, and it's not overly cumbersome or anything else, and it's quick to put together when I need to use it. So that's the frontal view. I think you can see the image reasonably clearly on the Shinobi, and all the components are just sort of readily available. I'll put some links up to the bits and pieces that I used to put it together, but they're just examples of what you can and can't use for something like this. As I said, if you're a bit of a DIY type, then you could probably convert anything into a reasonable thing without actually having to buy expensive cages and things like that. I wasn't going to spend hundreds of dollars on a cage for the Shinobi when I already had bits and pieces around that would work just as well. So that's the unit itself, and as you saw, I can control the focus quite well from the handle itself, and I can actually see with the focus peaking when things are actually in focus, so that works well. Now, talking about apps, as I said, I'm not really a big fan of the Zeppon app. I don't think it's all that good. Zeppon has indicated that they're upgrading it. I haven't seen anything on that score yet, but the app that comes with the Hollyland is not that much better, to be quite honest. I find that it's a little bit frustrating to get running. For some reason, when you go into the main screen to do your connection, it requires a passcode for the Hollyland Mars 400 series of transmitters, even though this is a 300 series, and it says put in the last 7 digits of the serial number, which I don't have a 400, so I just put 1 to 7 in there, and all of a sudden it goes and I'm allowed to connect up and everything else. But it has a similar sort of an issue when it comes to creating the ad hoc network, and you've got to sort of jump through a few hoops to connect to it, and I can understand part of it. There's a wireless network operating inside here, and it has to disconnect from that and connect up to the new network. But what I found is that the app can sometimes be a bit slow in actually connecting, that is to a mobile phone or the tablet and whatever, and I have to try it a few times before it actually connects. Using the receiver, not a problem. I can connect it to my TV through HDMI. All works fine, and that's one of the reasons why I actually wanted to have this, so that I'm not relegated to using a mobile phone app or a tablet app and stuff like that. I can connect it directly to something that visually works really, really well, and I'm happy with that sort of aspect of it. But for some reason, apps are always deficient in most of these products. I don't know why, but pretty much every product that comes out of a very, very good product manufacturer, they sort of neglect or just don't seem to have the staff that can create really good apps with good UIs and so on. But I don't intend to use the app that much, so I'm not concerned about that. I'll be using the transmitter and receiver when needed. So I think I've got everything covered on this Hollyland Mars 300 Pro enhanced model. The enhanced model is the one with the antennas that screw on top. It gives you a bit more range and clarity of signal, I believe. The unit works on the 5 gigahertz system, not the 2.4. It means that it doesn't penetrate walls and so on as well as a 2.4 gigahertz system does, but it allows for, I think, higher speeds and so on, which reduces the latency, and I think that's why they've gone for the 5 gigahertz with the image transmission system, though other systems use 2.4 and seem to work well and get fairly substantial range. So for me, this works fine. I've got no complaints. I haven't had any issues with the units so far. The batteries work well. The systems themselves connect reasonably well. There's no issues there other than a delay there. And they hold on to the signal extremely well, moving about and so on. And so outdoors especially, I think it's going to be a real boon to be able to actually visually see what's going on when you're away from the camera. And I think that's what it's all about. So basically on that note, I'll call it cheers.